Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters of Africa, sons and daughters of the soil, prepare your minds and open your hearts, for what you are about to hear is not just a speech. It is a fire, it is a wind of truth. It is the roaring echo of African consciousness speaking through one of our most fearless voices. Today, in a time when the world trembles with uncertainty and Africa battles both visible and invisible chains, we gather to speak not of despair, but of hope. Not of submission, but of resistance. Not of politicians who sell the people, but of warriors who serve them. And to guide us through this moment, we are honored, deeply honored, to welcome a man whose voice has become a weapon for truth. A scholar with the soul of a lion, a teacher who reminds tyrants of their expiration date, a patriot whose words sting the corrupt and strengthen the just. He has warned Africa when she slept. He has scolded her when she stumbled. And now he comes to speak of a new flame rising in our time, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young, fearless son of Burkina Faso, who has dared to stand tall when others bowed low, who has reminded us that youth is not a weakness and courage is not a crime. So if you came for comfort, prepare to be shaken. If you came for empty applause, prepare to be challenged. Because this voice, this vessel, speaks only one language, truth. Brothers and sisters, give your full attention, give your open hearts, and give your African pride to the man who speaks for the unborn and stands for the betrayed, the conscience of a continent. Please welcome the uncompromising, unbowed, and unbought voice of African liberation. There are moments in history that do not simply pass, they pierce the soul of a people and awaken something that had been sleeping for too long. And in one such moment, Africa witnessed the rise of a young man who stood not with polished words or expensive suits, but with a conviction burning so brightly it could not be ignored. In a world drowning in silence, he spoke. In a time soaked in fear, he acted. In a continent weary of betrayal, he dared to lead. Ibrahim Traoré did not just walk into power, he walked into the hearts of millions who had forgotten what true courage looks like. For too long, Africa has watched her hopes rise and fall with false prophets in expensive palaces. For too long, the people have watched promises turn into poison, freedom into chains, elections into games, and patriotism into profit. But when the fire is almost gone, it does not take a flood to reignite it, just one spark. And that spark came not from the capitals of Europe or the boardrooms of billionaires, but from a humble soldier who remembered what it meant to serve the people. That soldier was Ibrahim Traoré, and his rise was not just political, it was spiritual. You see, this was not just about Burkina Faso. This was about every African who has watched their leaders kneel before foreign powers. Every African who has watched their children dig through dust for water while their presidents drink champagne in New York. Every African who has wondered, will we ever be free, truly free in our own land? And then came a voice that refused to speak in the language of fear, a voice that did not ask permission to be bold, a voice that called out corruption, that stood up to foreign manipulation, that said what others only dared to whisper. That voice reminded Africa of her greatness, and it was not the age of this young captain that shocked the world, it was his clarity. It was not his uniform, it was his discipline. It was not the power he took, it was the power he refused to abuse. He spoke like the sons of Sankara. He walked like the heirs of Nkrumah. He reminded us that revolution is not chaos, it is cleansing. That leadership is not a crown, it is a cross. That Africa does not need new colonizers with darker skin, it needs new servants with purer hearts. And when the people saw him, they did not just see a leader, they saw themselves, they saw what they could become if only they believed again, if only they fought again, if only they loved this continent enough to bleed for her, work for her, die for her if necessary. Ibrahim Traoré became the symbol of what happens when love for the people becomes more powerful than the lust for power. And suddenly, the youth of Africa began to lift their heads. The silence began to break. The fear began to melt. From Lagos to Lusaka, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, a new wind began to blow, the wind of self-determination, the wind of Pan-African pride, the wind of awakening. This is the birth of a new African spirit, not of bitterness, but of boldness. Not of tribalism, but of unity, not of dependency, but of defiance. And in this spirit we do not ask for freedom, we demand it. In this spirit we do not wait for opportunity, we create it. In this spirit we do not trade our land for loans or our dignity for development. In this spirit we rise as one people, one voice, one destiny, and let no one mistake this for anger. It is deeper than that. It is purpose. It is remembrance. It is the ancestors whispering, "Stand tall." It is the children waiting for proof that we have not given up on them. It is the soil itself groaning for justice. And now, with every speech that speaks truth to power, with every leader who refuses to kneel to foreign masters, with every African youth who decides to stay and build instead of flee and beg, this spirit grows stronger. Ibrahim Traoré has not just stepped into leadership, he has stepped into history, and through his boldness the continent has remembered her fire, because when one brave soul rises, the whole continent remembers how to stand. Leadership, my brothers and sisters, is not a throne to sit on. It is a burden to carry. It is not for those who hunger for applause, but for those who thirst for justice. It is not a tool to enrich oneself, but a weapon to defend the voiceless. That is why when Ibrahim Traoré emerged, not with designer clothes, not with grand speeches, but with clear purpose and unshakable loyalty to his people, the world did not know how to react. Because for the first time in a long time, Africa saw a man who walked into power not to consume, but to contribute, not to rule, but to serve, not to gain, but to give. You see, many wear the title of leader, but few carry the scars of sacrifice. Traoré came from the trenches, not the elite. He rose not through manipulation, but through mission. While others used their positions to build empires of corruption, he chose a path of humility, simplicity, and service. Where others surrounded themselves with luxury, he surrounded himself with the people. While some speak of change with golden tongues, he lives it with calloused hands. That is the difference between a ruler and a revolutionary. A ruler waits for comfort. A revolutionary is prepared to suffer for what is right and make no mistake. This is not about sainthood. It is about sincerity. It is about integrity. It is about the rare and powerful decision to put the nation above the self. Traoré could have chosen the easy way. He could have bowed to foreign puppeteers. He could have looted state coffers, flown to Europe, and lived like a king. But he chose Burkina Faso. He chose the poor. He chose to be misunderstood by elites so he could be trusted by the masses. That is not weakness. That is the highest form of strength. The old style of leadership in Africa has failed us. Leaders who drove Mercedes Benzes while their citizens walked barefoot. Leaders who sent their children to Switzerland while the village school had no chalk. Leaders who built fences around state houses while the people slept under broken roofs. Leaders who spoke the Queen's English but could not understand the cries of their own people. That is the kind of leadership that digs the grave of a continent, but the tide is turning, there is a new voice rising, a new standard being set, a new model emerging, one that says a leader must live among his people, not above them. Ibrahim Traoré did not become a symbol of hope because of how loud he speaks, but because of how clearly he listens. He did not become a rallying cry for African youth because of how much he promised, but because of how much he gave up. He let go of the comfort of silence, the privilege of safety, and the temptation of compromise. That kind of sacrifice is what separates a mere president from a true patriot, because to lead is to bleed for the people, not to feast on their suffering. And it is not just what he says, it is how he lives. You will not find him traveling in 10-car convoys while hospitals run dry. You will not find him hiding behind bulletproof glass while the people face bullets with bare chests. You will not find him celebrating independence with fireworks while the nation still carries colonial chains. He understands that freedom is not declared by words, it is proven by action, and true leaders, real revolutionaries, do not need titles. Their legitimacy comes from the hearts of their people, not the signatures of global powers. This is what it means to be a warrior for the people. It means building, not boasting. It means serving, not stealing. It means protecting the weak, not partnering with the strong to exploit them. It means refusing to be a puppet, even if it means being a target. And that kind of leadership sends fear through the spine of oppressors, because they know that when one African rises in truth, others will follow. The youth of Africa are not inspired by suits and speeches anymore. They are watching the feet, not just the mouth. They are searching for examples, not excuses. They are hungry not for perfect leaders, but for honest ones, for courageous ones, for those who will walk with them, struggle with them, and remind them that they are not forgotten. Ibrahim Traoré has become that reminder, that warrior, that symbol of selfless, sacrificial, people-centered leadership that Africa has long been denied but now begins to reclaim, because the one who walks with the people will always be stronger than the one who rules above them. The chains of Africa have not always been made of iron. In this modern era, they come wrapped in policy papers, loans, trade agreements, and military alliances that have nothing to do with protection and everything to do with control. They come hidden behind smiling ambassadors and economic advisors who speak the language of partnership, but act in the shadows of puppetry. For decades, this has been the silent war on Africa's dignity. They no longer march with guns, they come with pens, and for too long our leaders signed away our power in exchange for comfort. But then came a man, young, bold, and unafraid to say what many only whispered: "No more puppets in Africa." Ibrahim Traoré stood not only against corruption at home, but against domination from abroad. He recognized that Burkina Faso, like many African nations, had long been manipulated by foreign powers who wore the mask of friends but acted like masters. He saw how so-called aid was used to weaken sovereignty. He watched how terror was not just born in the forests, but sponsored in boardrooms far away from Ouagadougou. And when he saw that the people's freedom was being traded for foreign influence, he said no. Not in his time, not under his watch. He broke the silence that suffocates many African presidents, the silence that comes with fear of sanctions, the silence that is paid for in soft loans, and the silence that pretends that colonization is over while our economies are still dictated from outside. He refused to be a messenger of colonial interests. He chose instead to become a guardian of African dignity. That decision came with a price: pressure, propaganda, threats, isolation. But he understood something critical, that no nation becomes truly free until it controls its own destiny, its land, its wealth, and its voice. This is what separates Ibrahim Traoré from the rest. He is not just leading a country, he is confronting an entire system. A system built to keep Africa begging, a system designed to keep us divided, a system that punishes those who resist and rewards those who kneel. But instead of bowing, Traoré stood. He did not beg for approval from foreign powers. He drew strength from his people, and when others trembled before global institutions, he stood tall before his nation and said, "Our soil is not for sale. Our future is not for rent. Our people are not slaves." His stance is not anti-West. It is pro-Africa. There is a difference. He does not reject friendship. He rejects manipulation. He does not fear cooperation. He fears exploitation. He wants trade, not traps. He wants investment, not interference. and he understands that real independence does not come from flag-raising ceremonies, but from the ability to make decisions without asking for permission. That is the kind of defiance Africa needs, not defiance for ego, but defiance for dignity. Not to provoke, but to protect. Young people across the continent are awakening because of this message. They are seeing that true power does not lie in copying foreign systems that were never designed to liberate us. True power lies in reclaiming our voice, our culture, our pride. They are realizing that Africa does not need to be saved, it needs to be respected, and respect begins with resistance to oppression in all its forms. That is what Ibrahim Traoré has taught them, not through empty slogans, but through fearless decisions. He expelled those who undermined his people's safety. He challenged military pacts that had failed to deliver peace. He demanded transparency in contracts and accountability in partnerships. He replaced whispers with words and hesitation with action. In doing so, he reminded Africa that courage is contagious, that once one man breaks free, others will follow. That once one country refuses to kneel, others will rise to stand. Burkina Faso is no longer a footnote. It is a front line in the battle for true African freedom, and let us be clear, this is not just Burkina Faso's moment. It is Africa's turning point, because for every young African who watches Ibrahim Traoré resist foreign puppeteers, there is new belief born in their hearts, belief that the time of masters and messengers is ending. Belief that we can govern ourselves, feed ourselves, defend ourselves, and define ourselves. Belief that we are not cursed, we are just waking up from the long sleep of colonization disguised as cooperation. In the courage of one man, an entire continent sees its reflection, and in the voice that said no more puppets, Africa hears a call to finally walk upright, proud and free. Because when one African stands against neocolonialism, he lifts the head of the entire continent. Across the vast lands of Africa, from the dry deserts of the Sahel to the green valleys of the Great Lakes, something long forgotten is stirring again. For decades, our children were taught to lower their expectations, to dream in moderation, and to wait, always wait, for a better tomorrow. We were told to be patient while our leaders failed us. We were told to smile while our birthrights were stolen. But a new generation is waking up, not with anger alone, but with vision, not with hate, but with hope. And that hope now has a face, a voice, and a name, one that is echoing from the streets of Ouagadougou to the classrooms of Nairobi, from the radios in Bamako to the town halls in Harare. It is the name of a young man who has reignited the Pan-African spirit, Ibrahim Traoré. He did not ask to be called a symbol, he simply chose to act, but in choosing action over apathy, he reminded this continent what is possible when courage walks into power. What started as a military intervention became a movement. What started in Burkina Faso now pulses in the hearts of African youth everywhere. They see him not as a savior, but as proof that we too can lead with honor. That our leaders do not have to be corrupt, that our dreams do not have to be exported, that our people do not have to suffer while a few grow fat from foreign bribes. Ibrahim Traoré has become a torch, not just lighting the path forward, but setting fire to the lies that held Africa back. And that fire is not one of destruction, it is one of purification. It is burning away the lies that said Africa cannot lead itself. It is reducing to ash the myth that youth cannot govern. It is incinerating the excuses of those who said resistance is futile. Across the continent, young people now understand that they are not too young to lead, not too weak to speak, and not too poor to dream. Ibrahim Traoré's rise has sparked not a rebellion, but a resurrection of the African soul. He has given permission to the oppressed to speak, to the forgotten to rise, and to the dreamers to believe again. This fire is also a call to unity, because no African country will ever be free alone. The enemies of African liberation do not care whether you are Burkinabe, Congolese, Sudanese, or Kenyan. They exploit our divisions while uniting against our progress. But now, something different is taking place. A new rhythm, a common voice, a shared fire. Pan-Africanism is no longer just an idea in old speeches. It is becoming a living force, and that is the ultimate power of what Traoré has sparked. He has not just challenged his own country to rise, he has dared an entire continent to stand together. He reminds us that unity is not a luxury, it is a necessity, that we cannot be free while our neighbors are still chained, that our borders may be drawn by colonizers, but our destiny must be written by Africans. And for the first time in many years, we are beginning to speak with one voice, a voice that says we will defend our resources, a voice that demands justice, a voice that cries not for charity, but for equity. That voice is growing louder, and it is being led by the youth, inspired by one of their own. In the universities, students now study not only books, but the courage to resist. In the slums, artists are painting murals of resistance and pride. In the villages, elders speak of the new dawn, and in the minds of every young African who has ever doubted their worth, there is now a seed of fire, a seed that says, I too can change my country, I too can rise. That is the power of leadership by example. It multiplies itself, it does not hoard hope, it spreads it like wildfire. Let us understand clearly, this is not about one man, it is about what one man has triggered in millions. Ibrahim Traoré has reminded us that Africa is not dying, it is awakening. That we are not defeated, we are regrouping. That we are not broken, we are rebuilding. He has lit a fire that is now burning in Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, Morocco, and beyond. A fire that says Africa will no longer beg. Africa will no longer bow. Africa will lead itself, because when one spark dares to burn with purpose, a continent remembers how to rise.